Hello and welcome to another marvelous video. I'm your host Will. It's time for another breakdown video. But instead of a character or a weapon, I think it's time we broke down the facts about a ship. And in this video, what better ship could there be than the USCSS Prometheus from the Alien franchise? Let's get into the facts.
The USCSS Prometheus was conceived with the intent of discovering the secrets of life and the origin of humans, and delivering such secrets to humanity. The brainchild of Peter Weyland, this ship had a great mission before it. It was to travel into the depths of space, to a distant moon where no human had ever gone. And that's why Prometheus had to be designed and built with innumerable things in mind. When the vessel was finally finished, it had the capacity and capability to sustain life for extended periods of time. It could travel multiple times the speed of light and was durable enough to traverse trillions and trillions of kilometers in a single mission. But that's not all. The USCSS Prometheus also housed several other vehicles and what can only be described as the most advanced form of miniature hospital. It is truly a thing to marvel at, and in this video, that's exactly what we're gonna discuss. The ins and outs and the history of the USCSS Prometheus. So, without further ado, let's get to it. What was the idea behind Project Prometheus? So Project Prometheus was actually conceived and planned by Peter Weyland, the head honcho of Weyland Corp, and needless to say, it was probably the most significant initiative that Weyland Corp had taken up until that point. In fact, several years after the disaster on LV-223, Weyland Corp merged with Yutani Corporation following a hostile takeover. But more on that later. As the brainchild of Sir Peter Weyland, he got to name the mission, and he chose to name it after the great titan Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans. Peter wanted to become the next Prometheus by giving humanity a gift of his own, one that would also help his investors and his company reach the ultimate truth through the USCSS Prometheus. Interestingly, the USCSS designation actually means United States Commercial Starship, and many ships that Weyland Yutani later operated were also given the same USCSS designation. On the other hand, colonial marine warships, for instance the Sulaco, were indicated as USS, which means United States Ship. Furthermore, we know that several of the ships appearing in the Alien universe are named after works or characters associated with Joseph Conrad, but Prometheus was taken from Greek mythology. The defined mission of the project was to find out just how mankind originated. And not just how. Project Prometheus wanted to discover where it originated. Peter Weyland and his company believed that, in addition to finding some invaluable truth, this voyage would also bring great dividends for investors and the common masses alike, both spiritually and individually. Of course, the mission was incredibly ambitious in scope because, with Project Prometheus, Weyland wanted to send humans farther into deep space than they had ever traveled before. And of course, because such a mission was deemed to carry high risks, Peter Weyland got only the best of the best and the most skilled people to work on the project. People who were exceptional professionals and dedicated their skills and expertise to ensuring the success of the mission. What was the USCSS Prometheus like? The Prometheus was a Heliades Class J scientific exploratory vessel, which basically means it was built for deep space scientific exploration and operated by Weyland Corporation itself. And needless to say, for Mr. Weyland, this was a very big deal. Now, the Heliades class line itself was pretty advanced, and these ships were the first faster-than-light capable human space vehicles. Weyland had been the first company to achieve the feat, and it was like a crowning jewel back in the early 2030s, when the class entered service. More specifically, it was in the year 2031 when the prototype Heliades was launched. At that point, this type of ship was seen as a massive leap forward, and the first ship of the line, which was commanded by Captain Corin McManus, represented Weyland Corp's newest flagship model. In fact, the Heliades class design later became the foundation for Weyland Yutani's Magellan Class J scientific exploratory vessel. As for the Prometheus itself, the ship was around 130 meters long, about 49 meters wide, and 36.5 meters tall. So yes, it was large, but it also had some serious power. The vessel used 4 nuclear-powered ion plasma engines driven by nuclear fission generators, which allowed it to travel faster than light and also perform vertical landings and takeoffs. Its average speed during the journey to LV-223 has been estimated at around 15 times the speed of light, which tells you just how advanced this thing was supposed to be. The Prometheus also came with independent advanced navigation systems, sensor arrays made for long-range reconnaissance, and large communications antenna, which in other words means that the USCSS Prometheus was capable of traveling far and wide, scanning great distances, and staying connected as much as possible during an extremely distant mission. It wasn't designed as a combat ship, but even then, it had an armory with pistols, shotguns, and flamethrowers. And that totally made sense because you were ultimately heading into the unknown aboard the Prometheus, and you needed to have some sort of protection on board. Its cargo capacity was also huge, going up to 9 million tons. It carried 2 heavy mineral extractors, 8 Class A individual crew ejection pods, 4 NR9 series all-terrain vehicles, 5 RT series group transports, 17 hypersleep chambers, and even a Class D crew escape module built into the mission director's suite. At the time of its launch, Prometheus was considered the most advanced and expensive deep space exploration vessel ever made, with an estimated cost of at least $1 trillion, funding for which was made possible through several stakeholders, which included the government and private parties, apart from the money that came from Weyland himself. What happened to the Prometheus? Well, the whole thing really started back in 2089, when archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway found something that simply could not be overlooked as some sort of coincidence. Across several ancient cultures that had no direct link to each other, they found artwork that seemed to point towards the same star map. Holloway and Shaw came to form the opinion that this map that they had been seeing time and again simply could not be some random ancient pattern, but maybe an invitation that the very creators of humanity had left behind for us to find. And in the alien universe, these beings, these creators, are called engineers. And since this was a humongous claim, it was obvious that it would also need some serious money if someone wanted to check it out. And that is where Sir Peter Weyland came in. As the founder of Weyland Corp, Peter funded the scientific vessel USCSS Prometheus and sent it to LV-223, which, as many of you may know, is a moon of a gas giant planet called Calpamos in the Zeta Reticuli system. The goal here was simple enough. All they had to do was follow the map, find the engineers, and get answers about the origins of humanity. But of course, the scale of it all was gonna be insanely huge. The crew spent most of its super long journey in stasis, but since the ship could face wear and tear or face other problems, they had the android David stay awake and handle the ship. And yeah, David was considered like a son to Peter Weyland. Interestingly, David also spent his time studying languages, including Schleicher's Fable, which is one of the earliest texts composed in a restructured form of Proto-Indo-European, or PIE. Since PIE has no surviving written texts, linguists reconstructed it by comparing ancient language families represented by languages such as Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek. I like this fact about David, because he was a linguist with a purpose, and if we're going to meet ancient alien gods, we need someone who can at least try to understand them. It was the year 2093 when Prometheus reached its destination, i.e. LV-223, but after reaching it, the crew eventually learned that Peter Weyland's secret purpose for this mission was to ask the engineers to extend his life. But that's not all, of course, because LV-223 housed a dangerous biological agent capable of mutating and killing living organisms, and people like Fifield and Milburn learned that the hard way, the very hard way. Furthermore, Meredith Vickers, who was in charge on behalf of the company, made it very clear that nobody was to make contact with the engineers without her permission. Once the ship landed near a massive artificial structure, the expedition team went inside, and that is where everything began to fall apart. David activated a holographic recording, which led them to a decapitated alien body and a chamber full of strange black urns. David secretly took one of the urns and later extracted some of the black liquid inside it, namely Sean Fifield and Rafe Milburn got lost inside the structure. Milburn was later killed by a creature. We know that David infected Holloway as well, while Fifield came back horribly mutated, killed several crew members, and would have made it farther into the Prometheus had it not been for Captain Idris Janek, who helped kill him with the ship's vehicle and flamethrowers. And you know what? Idris Elba played Janek, while Benedict Wong played the ship's pilot, Ravel. I thought you might like a little bit of trivia. Anyway, moving on. So all of this was obviously pretty bad, but the worst was yet to come. Janek soon realized that the structure had probably been an engineer military installation, and that its occupants had once planned to wipe out humanity. One awakened engineer now intended to continue that mission. Shaw convinced Janek to stop the engineer's ship from reaching Earth, so Janek crashed Prometheus straight into the Juggernaut. The Prometheus was destroyed, and everyone left aboard died with it. Very little reliable data from LV-223 made it back to Earth, and even inside Weyland-Yutani, the company that came after Weyland Corp, the full truth of what happened there remained obscured. What components made the Prometheus whole? So when we talk about the USCSS Prometheus, we aren't just talking about one big ship flying through space. This entire vessel is actually a combination of several vehicles and systems that together form a complete mission system in itself. It is packed with all kinds of transports, survival tech, medical equipment, exploration suits, escape pods, and all the machinery that could be needed to keep a crew alive as well as functional in deep space. For instance, one major part of the Prometheus setup was the RT series group transport. This thing came with a shape memory alloy wheel system, and its wheels had nano-reinforced hard composite treads that could handle temperatures up to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't need to spell out that this tough piece was not built for smooth roads or comfortable travel. It was made for rough, hostile places, and its durability and functionality were really tested on LV-223, where it had to face several hardcore obstacles. Its ceramic gas turbine engine produced nearly 400,000 pounds of thrust, which meant that the weight of the cargo it could hold was nearly unrestricted, unless you were carrying something whose density was immense. And with a 5.7 meter wheelbase, the personnel bay could comfortably carry as many as 20 people. But as I said, weight wasn't the problem at all. Then there was the NR9 series all-terrain vehicle, which was more of a two-person transport. It used 4 track-belted wheels and could handle near-vertical terrain while carrying a smaller payload. Weyland also produced the NR6 vehicle. Weyland planetary engineers could use it to survey areas of newly discovered proto-colonies that were previously out of reach. Under normal atmospheric pressure and gravitational pull, these vehicles could hit maximum speeds of about 88 miles per hour. Furthermore, the front and rear wheels used variable friction axles, which allowed micro-torque gear adjustments for better safety and movement across alien surfaces, like that of LV-223. Of course, a ship like Prometheus also needed hypersleep chambers because long-distance space travel was almost always a very time-consuming affair, and one could spend several years trapped inside the vessel. Not only would being away cause the problems of aging and the consumption and decomposition of food and water, it would also make the crew highly agitated and frustrated if care was not taken. For instance, the record for the longest continuous time spent in space on a single mission is held by cosmonaut Valery Polyakov, who stayed in orbit for 437 days, which is about a year and a couple of months. Imagine what would happen if someone had stayed confined in space in a single vessel for 4 or 5 years. So this is why hypersleep chambers were indispensable to long-distance space travel. These chambers used holographic display that communicated with the ship's mainframe and monitored metabolic conditions so that cell function could be suspended. They could be programmed to begin, maintain, and end hypersleep stasis depending on mission length and how much faster than light travel was involved. Interestingly, they also had zero-loss lithium-ion batteries as a third backup system, and in an emergency, those batteries could support the chamber for up to 100 years. Hypersleep maintenance overseers like David could even start dream reading by creating a neural link through a neurovisor, as in David could actually see what kind of dreams people in hypersleep were having, which, to be honest, is pretty cool. Now, the Prometheus also had escape systems, and one of the most important was the Class D crew escape module. Vickers' suite turned out to be this lifeboat when it ejected from the ship and crash-landed almost immediately. Later, it appeared again when Shaw confronted the engineer. The module was made only for FTL craft of the right size, and it was basically an embedded emergency pod with 7 rooms that were considerably more luxurious than the others, and of course, these rooms were meant for VIPs only. Additionally, these rooms had their own navigation and piloting controls, and their reclamation and decontamination system could provide one occupant with 50 years of breathable air, whether they used hypersleep or not. The ship also had 8 Class A individual crew ejection pods. These could launch automatically, and when Vickers escaped from Prometheus, she used one of the individual pods, which flew on its own for a few seconds before it hit the ground. So, its primary and seemingly its only function was basically to get people out. Likely, it was not meant for any long-distance travel or anything. I'm not even sure if one could maneuver it. Anyway, another major piece of equipment was the Pauling MedPod 720i. This machine could handle basic wound repair, appendectomies, cesarean sections, laparoscopic ablations, and concentrated antibiotic injections. It could not only diagnose, but also treat and perform surgical procedures and very effectively too. For most of its functions, the machine used ultrafine laser cuts guided by 3D anatomical scans. The Prometheus MedPod was calibrated for male patients, but Shaw still managed to bypass that setup and use it for foreign body extraction surgery to remove the organism she had conceived after intercourse with the infected Holloway. Interestingly, Shaw had previously been infertile, but she still conceived that horrid little creature. The ship also had interstellar communication antennae, with many of them placed around the front, much like the USCSS Nostromo. For fieldwork, the crew had Presidium Mark VIII Advanced SC suits, used for exploration, reconnaissance, and tactical movement. Their nano-reinforced composite helmets gave a 320-degree field of vision, along with displays for vitals, environmental readings, communications, and data analysis. They also had cadmium exoskeletons for stability on rough terrain, with optional iridium-coated laser-resistant light armor. And finally, there were the ECO All-World System survival suits. These had a metallic crimson design, rotary joints, and self-actuating fingers. Yes, they were bulky and had limited movement, but on the other hand, they offered full protection during extravehicular activity. Well, folks, that was all in this one, but there are just so many uber cool vehicles spread across the Alien franchise. And if you want to watch a video on any of those, you know where to leave your comments. If you like the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. Stay safe and have a good one.